The Indian people of western Montana moved with the cycles of plants, animals, and seasons for thousands of years. Through trade with other tribes, they acquired all they needed to survive, prosper, and create a living culture. French trappers and traders were probably the first to visit the Indians of this region. Lewis and Clark made contact with the Salish people in the Bitterroot, south of Missoula on their way west. Increasing numbers of explorers, traders, and pioneers put pressure on the government to confine the Indian hunters and gatherers to a specific geographic area. The Flathead Indian Reservation was established by the Treaty of Hellgate in July of 1855. By the terms of the treaty, the Flathead or Salish, Kootenai, and Upper Pend Oreilles ceded an aboriginal area of over 22 million acres to the United States. Reserved from the ceded area for use and occupation was the reservation known as the Flathead, which comprises 1.2 million acres. The Salish, Kootenai, and Upper Pend Oreilles lives became more complex as the years went on, with homesteading and other government intervention. The Jesuits established a mission at St. Ignatius in 1854 that took water from Mission Creek for irrigation of the crops by the priests. This was the first irrigation on record on the Flathead Indian Reservation. Prior to authorization of an irrigation project, many Indians and whites constructed ditches from the primary streams on the reservation to irrigate lands. In 1904, a federal act authorized a preliminary survey to determine if an irrigation project was feasible. In 1909, the first appropriation was made to begin construction. Subsequent acts provided appropriations for continuing construction. Until 1916, costs for construction were reimbursed back to the U.S. government from the sale of land and timber belonging to the tribes. In 1916, the costs for construction were shifted to the landowners who would benefit from the irrigation project. Indian lands were included in 1916, where they had been exempt earlier. The first power generation facility on the reservation was a small generator at Big Creek, now called Hell Roaring. This facility was built by the Mission Range Power Company, which existed from 1915 to 1927. Mission Range Power and Flathead Valley Electric Company were later purchased by the Public Utilities Consolidated Corporation. The original idea for power generation on the reservation was to provide power for the pumping station on the Flathead River to supplement gravity water supply for irrigation. The Newell Tunnel at the Kerr Dam site was built between 1909 and 1911 to be used for water diversion during construction of a power plant. For many years, power development was impractical. When the need for more irrigation water became evident, the interest in power development was revived, and in 1926, $395,000 was appropriated for planning. Electricity was needed to pump supplementary irrigation water. Actual construction was delayed because of the need for irrigation district formation and repayment contracts. The Flathead Irrigation District repayment contract was finalized in 1928, paving the way for construction. Rocky Mountain Power, which later became Montana Power Company, pushed for a major development at the Newell site rather than a small-scale project. They offered to sell the power at an attractive rate to the irrigation project. Finally, in 1930, the larger project was approved. Due to depressed business conditions, the construction was shut down in 1931. The Great Depression came and went. In 1936, work resumed. Kerr Dam, named after Rocky Mountain Power President Frank Kerr, was dedicated in August 1938. A 204-foot-high arch Kerr Dam is 800 feet wide at the top. Bottom thickness is 47 feet, tapering to 17 feet on top. 14 gates control the water flow, and 800-foot-long, 28-foot diameter tunnels carry water to the powerhouse. Today, Kerr Dam is co-licensed by PPL Montana, the successor to Montana Power, and the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes. The tribes have the option to buy Kerr Dam and become the sole licensee in 2015. The irrigation project purchased ownership and control of power lines on the reservation in 1931 from the Public Utilities Consolidated Corporation, which was in receivership at the time. Included in the purchase was the Hell-Roaring plant and 38 miles of 16,500-volt power lines from there to Polson. Connecting lines were also included to Ronan, Charlotte, and St. Ignatius. There were 945 customers and very few rural connections in 1931. At that time, a power line was built to connect Thompson Falls and the Kerr site for construction. This line was later used to service Hot Springs, Camas, and surrounding farms. The 1930s were a busy time. 1931 saw the Camas Division completed with lines built to Valley View and Round Butte and the Kerr Dam area. The utility rebuilt the distribution system in Polson and Pablo in 1932 and built lines to Finley Point and the Flathead Agency near Dixon. By 1933, the Ronan distribution system had been rebuilt and a line extended from the Indian Agency to Dixon. Also, a three-phase line was extended from Kerr Dam to D'Asti. In 1934, power lines were extended west of Pablo. The Charlotte substation was moved to 9-pipe, and the Moise and North Crow districts received power. Work started on a line to Arley in 1935, and lines were extended to Leon, east of Charlotte. By 1936, Arley was electrified and a distribution system completed for that area. Finishing that work and extending lines to isolated and rural residences continued through the 50s. As the use of electricity increased in that era, operation of the power system became more complex and financially challenging.
Didn't have enough money to hire a lineman to put in that position, so they put me in that position. I was assistant project engineer, and then I moved into the project engineer. In between times, I was a draftsman, I was a surveyor, everything that went along with it. I dug holes, dug poles, helped set poles, I climbed poles.
Chuck Dixon worked for the power company beginning in 1945 and was project engineer until his retirement in 1982. Early operations of the facility were threadbare, with a small staff trying to do many jobs. Staff makeup consisted of
superintendent, the assistant superintendent, power. There was 2 girls in the outer office, and there was an engineer. Well, there must have been about 8 or 10 linemen in the fields, and then they had a building department down to St. Ignatius. I don't know, I would guess maybe 25 people, 30 people maybe at the most.
The transition from gravity flood irrigation for farming to sprinklers had a large impact on the need for power in the valley, especially in the summer.
Because the load had varied over the years a little bit, and its transformation from all gravity systems to partial sprinkler systems occurred during my time, which made quite a difference in some places, you know.
This reduced the number of ditches and the amount of water needed to meet the irrigation need.
Our big problem all the time was financing. You kept fighting financing, and I think looking back, There were several reasons for that. We didn't have contacts in Washington, D.C. that we should have had. And also, our project engineers were faced with the financing from the irrigation. And if you remember at that time, the irrigation wasn't, the crops weren't putting out all that much money. So the project engineer was being under fire about the O&M levy on the lands, and return that reflected onto the power. And as a result, we just didn't have the money. I remember one time we didn't get paid, believe it or not.
The operation and maintenance levy was a charge against land under irrigation that was used by the irrigation project for operation and upkeep of the system.
Well, we had safety practices, but the big problem with safety practices, it costs money. And in order to have a good safety program, you have to have a little bit of money to pay for it. And that was our problem. We thought safety, we talked safety, but to actually work safety, there was things that we had to do, or we did, in order to keep the power flowing. That was not all that safe.
My father worked for the power in the 1950s. And I remember going out and reading meters and having outages that I'd go out with Dad. I mean, it wasn't probably the most safe thing to do, but that's the way it worked back then.
From 1904 to 1987, the Flathead Irrigation Project consisted of irrigation and power divisions. From 1987 to 1988, the divisions were totally independent. Contracting of the power system became possible due to the independent status. In 1988, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes contracted management of the power system from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Mission Valley Power, MVP, was born.
Yeah, under 93-638, which was the Indian Self-Determination Law, was passed in 1975. And what this was to allow tribal governments to contract their own federal entities, such as health, welfare, law and order, whatever it may be at that time being run by the federal government through the Bureau. We had a right, if we could prove that we could manage them, we had a right to contract those and therefore manage them.
The Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes have aggressively pursued contracting programs that were formerly operated by the federal government and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Public Law 93-638 contracting can be an advantage for tribes. However, there can be issues, and tribes need to understand the possible traps.
A tribe with no money at all pick up a 638 contract, and they may need administrative fee of 40-45%. So if they picked up a contract, they actually only had about 55% to actually run the contract. Well, we didn't have this problem. One, we had resources. One, we had a set goal that all the council were looking at. We weren't afraid to use those resources, but also we realized that we had to be successful. And under 638, to satisfy all the needs, we had about 3 solid inches of paperwork just to pacify and be sure that we covered everything to show that we could in fact contract and operate. And the 638 basically is you have to prove yourself, and you have to prove yourself for a set period of time, and then you can do it again.
The transition from federal management to tribal management of the power system had its critics.
Number one, people were terrified that we would have power. And I don't mean the power of Mission Valley power, but that kind of power that you get when you control something. There was a great resistance to this. It became a real political issue.
I think it was fairly controversial at the time. There were, you heard comments, stereotypical comments about the tribe not being able to manage a business and that they wouldn't be able to manage the utility or that the rates would go up. If there were concerns at the beginning, those concerns went away pretty fast.
This was a first small utility power division that the Bureau operated that was placed under a contract for the tribe to manage and operate. The very first. That was a challenge in itself because it had never been done before. And we knew it could be. We knew it could be. We had a thorough understanding that the tribe had the capabilities. They had the management capability. They had the tribal government, and they had the staff. That they actually could manage this project and do a better job than we were doing.
The BIA felt that operation and maintenance by the tribes would move the power system to a customer-oriented operation.
We, being the tribe, conducted a number of meetings in the communities and asked the people to come into those meetings and voice their concerns, voice their complaints. And when that was completed, the uncertainty stopped also.
And we all live here and want better things for everybody on the reservation. We just feel like sometimes with the government, when they have all their regulations and hoops that you have to jump through, it's a slow process for purchasing supplies or equipment. We felt that we could speed up that process. We could do a better job here locally by contracting.
We operate solely on the money we get from the customers for selling them power. And then we distribute that back out on rebuilding lines, building new substations, rebuilding substations, improving them, and paying for the wages of the people, contributing back into the community with donations and those kind of things. We get no extra dollars from the tribe or the federal government. It is solely ran on the returns from the customers' power bills. So we appreciate it if you pay your bill, because then we got money.
MVP cannot borrow money. They are legally constrained from borrowing money to finance operations or construction of facilities like power lines or buildings. Some utilities, including rural cooperatives, have to service millions of dollars a year in debt. This can be a tremendous burden on the customers, a problem that MVP doesn't have.
We knew the tribe was going to operate a very efficient utility and would keep the power rates as reasonable as possible, not only for the citizens, but also for the businesses in the valley.
We now, I think, have probably one of the best maintained utilities in the state of Montana, whether private or public. I think the utility has done a terrific job improving system reliability. The other change has been that Mission Valley Power is much more customer-oriented, I believe. Our customer service department is much stronger than it used to be. And that shows up in our surveys of customers, where we have 90% of our customers saying that we have excellent to good customer service.
Mission Valley Power started a utility board and consumer council when the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes took over operation of MVP. Prior to that, no real public or consumer input was available concerning the operation of the utility.
Utility board has a leadership role when it comes to rate changes. Staff comes with a recommendation to the board, and generally that recommendation is based on a independent cost of service analysis and revenue requirement study that's done by an outside consulting firm. The revenue requirement study tells the utility how much money they should be bringing in. The cost of service study tells the utility how those costs should be distributed among our various ratepayers.
The role that the tribes and the tribal council plays is minor in the rate change process. They comment on the change like any other customer does. Tribal council does not set rates at MVP. They can only participate in the process like other customers. The role of the utility board is to set the policy direction for the system. This includes developing a plan of operations, rate schedules, annual budgets, supervision of the general manager, oversight of annual reports and audits, and operational planning. The purpose of the Consumer Council is to provide the consumer with the opportunity to participate in the development of the policies and rate structure. They also hear appeals of complaints of power consumers. Representation on the Consumer Council is made of a representative from Missoula County, 1 from Sanders, 2 from Lake County, and 3 at-large members. All must reside within the Mission Valley Power Service area. Montana deregulated power pricing in the late 1990s. As a federal contract utility, MVP was exempted.
However, the board has always taken the position, and the tribal council has supported us, that we're not afraid of competition, that we in fact have embraced competition, and that if other producers, electric producers, want to come in and offer power to our customers, we're not against that, and we would certainly open up our system to do that.
If a customer selected a new power supplier, Mission Valley Power would distribute power from that entity over their lines. They would require the customer to still pay MVP for the use of their lines and equipment. The mission of MVP is to provide the best possible and most effective electric power service to its customers, consistent with sound business principles.
We've always placed a very high priority on safety. I think that we'd have to say that that's our highest priority, is the safety and welfare of our employees and our customers. Secondly, I think customer service.
Reasonable rates are a high priority with customers and with Mission Valley Power.
Our rates are, in the United States, are one of the lowest, and in Montana, I believe there was only 2 utilities, and they're very small utilities. One was in Kootenai, and one was Lincoln, I believe, Lincoln Electric, and they were right just below us.
Support for the tribal management of the power system from the federal government has been strong and ongoing.
After we'd prepared the contract and let it be known that the tribe was going to manage that project, we got into a lawsuit with the water users and some of the local citizens, because they felt that the tribe, under a 638 contract, could not provide services to the non-Indian people. We knew they could. And as a result of that, the lawsuit took about a year to settle. And the judge came down in the favor of the tribe and the Bureau and said, yes, the tribe does have the right, and they can manage and provide the electrical services to the homeowners as well as the business of the Mission Valley. Ever since then, it's been managed very well.
When the tribes took over the operation, they found many problems with the condition of the system.
There were instances where we had one pole that there was some concern about. They took down that pole and 4 other poles fell over. The wires were holding up those 4 other poles. And so parts of the system had been neglected by the BIA in the past, and since the tribes have taken it over, we've invested, I think the figure now is upward around $25–30 million into the system infrastructure, and we've improved transmission, we've improved distribution significantly. So I think system reliability has improved dramatically over that amount of time.
In the past, people were just happy to have power. If they had an outage, they could live with that. Today, that isn't the case.
If we want to do some upgrades or some maintenance to systems such as we're doing right now in the downtown part of Polson, if we shut those businesses down, they'd howl like crazy, and I don't blame them. They're there to make money. If their doors aren't open, if the lights and the cash register don't work, as electricity dependent we are, it doesn't work.
Consultants had recommended for many years that a second entry point for powering the system be found. This led to the construction of the Dixon substation to back up the Kerr substation and feed the system from the south in case of a major outage. Because there were a number of wet zones along the south route, wood poles were not a good solution. MVP chose to build a line out of metal rather than chemically preserved wood because of environmental concerns and longevity.
I see crews out improving major arteries to the communities. When there happens to be an outage, it seems like the response is really good. I don't remember ever being without power for an extended period of time, maybe an hour, maybe not even, I can't even think of a 2-hour period. I see great things just based on what I've seen in the last 10 or so years. I just think it'll get better.
People are proud of it. And when they're proud of something, you know it's good. They're very upbeat on changes, and recently they changed their computer systems to better serve the people, and they're not afraid to get into the real world.
Challenges that I see is continue to manage a precision operation, one that will continue to deliver low-cost power.
Well, today Mission Valley Power is probably one of the most modern as far as equipment, buildings, facilities, and our lines are certainly improving on their ability to provide safe and reliable power. We've had a very progressive program to replace the equipment as well as the poles, wire, and substation upgrades to provide more power at the long outreaches of a service area. We still have some challenges ahead of us, and we look forward to the future. The future for Mission Valley Power is to continue to improve our system. Also, as we do that, to make sure that we provide a good workforce, a well-trained one that applies power to the air service area in a safe manner.
Today, MVP has 90 employees and over 16,000 accounts. The area is serviced by 2,144 miles of overhead lines and 103 miles of underground service. There are 21 substations and 360 kilowatts of hydro from the Hell-Roaring Generation Facility. Mission Valley Power is a customer-oriented agency that is proudly managed and operated by the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes of the Flathead Reservation.